Welcome to Admit One with GMoney. And today we have the founder and CEO of 4K Protocol, Web3 solution for tokenizing physical assets. By leveraging a decentralized network of storage guardians, 4K Protocol allows brands, creators, and collectors to easily access physically backed NFTs as a service. He's here to discuss how physically backed NFTs are the first step to mass adoption of blockchain technology and how 9DCC holders can benefit. Please welcome Richard Lee. Hey, Richard, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I think, we had chatted. I remember we had chatted probably like a year and a half ago, I think, at this point for the first time. But then I feel like we really bonded and we really met. It was at a party. It was the one that was at Grand Central. I think it was at Campbell's apartment, where we were bonding over our watches. And that's what, and we were like, and I think it was like, oh shit, like Richard from 4K, like, and then we literally just started going down that rabbit hole. And like, I'm just going to preface this. I want to go into your background a little bit, but I remember when I first got into the space, one of the first solutions that I thought was needed was a centralized custodian, right? Because it's like not, and I thought of it because of when people did the everydays drop, right? There was that claim window where there was a trade window and then there was a claim window. And if you didn't redeem the physical during that claim window, you weren't able to redeem it. And I was like, well, that sucks because that's going to like separate the physical from the digital. There has to be another way. And I remember I was trying to figure out the legality of it. And this is back when like nobody knew what NFTs were. And I spoke to a couple different art lawyers and people that already were running like free ports and custodials and stuff like that. And it basically came, I walked away being like, all right, I don't know if I necessarily want to go out and try to solve this issue because of the legality around it right now, but I do think it needs to get solved. And I know we connected a few months later, and that was incredible. And, I really, really believe that physically backed NFTs is a huge, huge market, especially as we transition from a more physical world to a digital world. I think that transition happens over time, but there's still so many legacy assets, right? So there's always going to be demand for it. So with that as a premise and why I was so excited to chat with you initially and work with you now, like tell for those who don't know, like a little bit about your background and, kind of how you got into crypto and ultimately what made you start 4K.
Awesome. So for background, I was just growing up and I was a huge nerd. So I was like on IRC at 7 years old, 9 years old on IRC. And I kind of stumbled later on in life, into the cypherpunk mailing list. So I was there when the original Satoshi white paper dropped. And I remember reading it and I was like, right after 2008, I was kind of disillusioned after '08. And I was like, this is kind of interesting. Like, this is kind of cool. So when it launched, I downloaded the wallet. And I remember, it taking 2-3 hours to sync to the blockchain before you guys use the wallet. And I was like, this is the future of cash. I thought it was crazy. And so I was like, this is wild to me. And then I waited 2 weeks later, I downloaded again. It's like, took a day to sync. And I'm like, this can't be the future of money. But anyhow, so got just involved because of, I think, the philosophical and ideological aspects of Bitcoin and back in the day. And I think it just really stuck with me, right? I think this was like, it made sense, is there going to be a digital currency for humanity? Yes, I think it totally makes sense, and so kind of was involved, entrepreneur for many years, did many things in crypto. I have stories of like, I had a marketing agency and Vitalik actually called me before he did the Ethereum ICO to help him market this. I have a crazy long story about that. He just showed me a logo. He's like, I want everyone in the world to know this. And I'm like, it's just a picture, like a diamond on a page. Like I couldn't market this.
Yeah, wait, can you tell us that story? I don't want to segue, but I'm sure people will find it interesting.
Right. So what happened was, so Vitalik calls me, and he's looking for a marketing agency, and he's like, I want to market this thing called Ethereum to the whole world. And he shows me the website, and it's like just the logo of the diamond. I'm like, well, how do I work with this? Ethereum is extremely difficult to spell, extremely difficult to translate around the world. And two, he was so focused on the technical aspect, specifically gas. Like I honestly thought gas was a really dumb word. I was like, could you use like protons, photons, ions, something that's like car gas? And then he comes up with this concept called Gwei. And I was like, why do you have two? Why do you have gas and Gwei? Like, how do I explain this to like retail? Like you like can't fathomly explain this. And so at the end of the story, I was like, I don't know how to market like a diamond logo on a website with no text, with nothing. And so I was like, I can't work with this. I have no idea what I'm doing with this. And so that's kind of like my my introduction to Ethereum, and that's how I learned about it. And I read about it because I was like, what is this? This guy calling me. And so it's kind of been there for, I think I've seen everything in Bitcoin, from the Ponzi schemes of Piratat 40. If people don't know, he at one point had 40% of all circulating supply of Bitcoin running a Ponzi. Bitcoin Savings and Trust, first exchange like Cryptsy, Mt. Gox, BTCE, been kind of seen all of these, right? And it's kind of seen the evolution of all of these. And so what I like to just to know from going through all of this is that every wave is really interesting. It brings a whole new set of people. And so that's something people don't really see. They think it's like the same crypto people, but the people that was in the ICOs of 2017 are different people than it is in the NFT people today, and different from the Bitcoin people in the first major run up in 2012, 2013. And so every single cycle comes up with new people. So that's really interesting. It's really great to see, new people enter the space. I just really hope the people that from last cycle kind of stay in. And so other things I did was, did a bunch of investing, started a small fund in 2017 in crypto. It was really challenging to raise a fund. It was just like, people were like, what's the intrinsic value of Bitcoin was the most common question I got. Did a bunch of investments there, launched a validator company called Certus One. I think that one became quite a little infamous or famous when Cosmos' Game of Stakes, and subsequently built Wormhole. And I think for 4K, was a core investment thesis of mine. So I wasn't the guy that jumped on the NFT bandwagon. I was actually really bullish on NFTs. So I was there during the early days of CryptoKitties. I was one of the guys that bought one of Blau's albums. So I was like really there in the early days. I had a whole bunch of punks. Sold those too early. And just because I was like, well, I don't want to speculate on these things. And to me, it was like 4K was a core investment thesis. And so I think, when you talk to crypto investors or people that thought leaders in the space, I like to talk to them about like, what are their core theses? Like, what are things that they're super bullish on that they fundamentally believe will be really important and kind of change how the world looks and change how the world perceives or interacts with this type of technology. And one of them was physical assets on chain. The first attempted implementation of this was actually on Bitcoin. It was through colored coins. So there was like some proposals or some things in the community like, hey, we can launch colored coins about for physical assets. But then the real first one I thought that came out was around early 2017 or mid 2017 was Ethereum. So there's a whole bunch of them. I tried this. There was Harbor. I tried it for real estate. There was like Codex Protocol. There was Mecenas for art. There was currently there was Centrifuge, and then Boson Protocol. And so I talked to all of these guys for a long time, and I was like, hey, like, what would be really cool to bring on chain would be collectibles. Like, the thing that when we talk about physical assets on chain is like, there has to be a crossover between people that like crypto and people that actually like these physical assets. I see no correlation between somebody that, degens into apes or like farms on, sushi, and then buying a 7% yield asset on a retirement home in Atlantic City. Like, there's no correlation between these two demographics. So I was like, real estate on chain, like, not interesting. Security tokens on chain is not interesting. I thought, it would be interesting to be like people that like collectibles or kind of, some of these things that, people that same demographic draws people to crypto. And I was like talking to all these companies. I was like, hey guys, like, hey, if you could build this like protocol or let alone this like custody service or a centralized warehousing service where you could store these assets and issue like tokens. And back then when I was talking to them, this was maybe like 2019, 2020, they thought I was speaking like a foreign language, like couldn't conceptually understand this concept. Same when I was pitching 4K about a year and a half ago, Physically-Backed NFTs. I think you'd be surprised in the amount of thought leaders that couldn't really understand this, concept of like using the NFT as a digital title of ownership. And so it's been challenging on an education basis. I just say like we're probably a little early, but I think now it's finally starting to get the ball rolling. And I think it's one of the most important primitives in crypto. Like I'd say like physical assets on chain has been kind of one of the holy grails of crypto, and it's been talked about for the last, 8 years, possibly maybe 6 to 8 years. And there's been attempts at this, but there hasn't been one that actually worked. And because a lot of them had this centralized approach or this like sell side approach, they'll like try to sell an asset or fractionalize an asset and sell it. And so what was really needed, in my opinion, in this space was a protocol for something like this. And that's why I kind of set out to do. And I thought, I was talking to a lot of people trying to build this protocol, and they're all like, Richard, you're the perfect guy to do this. You got to do it. And so that's where I am now.
Right. Yeah, no, thank you for that. You've been in crypto for a minute, so I want to commend you on being in crypto for this long and still having that desire to build, because I feel like a lot of people I know from the 2012 class aren't nearly as active as one would think, right? At this point in the cycle. So I really commend you on that. I think we totally agree on the thesis, right, for assets on chain, right? And like to your point, again, I think there's a time and a place when real estate will come on chain and mortgages will come on chain and all that, but that will be when like the yields in crypto are so much lower, right? Like the opportunity cost of capital is just going to be so much lower that you're like, okay, well, if I have access to a liquid investment that gives me real estate exposure, then sure, I'll take it. But as of right now, you don't get much of that crossover, right? And I think that's why, the collectibles market, the streetwear market, the sneaker market, like those, there's a lot of, I think, potential crossover there, which is what gets me really excited about it as well. You know,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah.
I think it's the targeting the right demographics. I think also if you just look at people who are actually are the ones speculating in the collectibles market, whether they be sneakers, trading cards, watches, whatnot, it's the younger demographic, and there's a huge crossover between them and crypto. I joined all of these sneaker discords, and one of the biggest I couldn't believe this. One of the biggest problems that they had in sneaker discords was like most people there were not over 18, and so they couldn't sign up for accounts or process like transactions. That was a huge
Right.
problem. They're like 15, 16-year-old kids doing it. And I'm thinking they're like, well, it's kind of crypto demographic from like 15 up to like, 35. And right. And it's like real estate is kind of like 30, 35 plus. And so there's no
Right.
crossover. And I thought, if you think about second point is in the entire collectibles industry, there's like virtually no financial tooling. You can't like, it's $400 billion industry. And there's like, you can't really get a loan against your Rolex, or you can't get a loan against your pair of sneakers. Like you have to generally go to a pawn shop, which you probably paid a 2 to 400% APR and get scammed. Right. And so if you
Mhm.
think about it, it's like one of the largest industries in the world, and it lacks like virtually any kind of financial services.
Right. Yeah. And that to me is like, and I've been talking about it a lot over the last few weeks, is that to me is like the huge unlock that is now being made available, right? Because it's like, you vault something, 4K issues the NFT, right? Then I can use that NFT and I can use that as collateral in like any NFT lending platform that will accept it, right? And then it's like if I have $1,000 pair of sneakers and somebody's like, all right, I know this is a mint condition pair of Yeezys. I know that because it's certified by 4K. I'm willing to lend you whatever, 30%, 40%, 20% LTV at a certain agreed upon rate. And now me as the owner, I don't have to sell that asset in order to unlock it, right? And you take a look at like, you know, asset classes around the world, like the mature ones have all of these financing instruments available. And, for some reason, the collectible market still doesn't, right? And that's because there have been so much friction, right, of what that looks like and, how that looks long term that I think crypto really solves by creating this global 24-hour marketplace that, is giving people access to liquidity, but then also giving them access to financial instruments that otherwise weren't made available to them. And
Yes,
that to me
correct.
is like the beauty of it, right?
Right. If you think about, if you think about this in aggregate, right? If you just zoom out and you kind of look at the whole industry, it's just kind of mind boggling. So for the people listening, I'll kind of explain kind of the Web 2 version of 4K. So what we do is you take an asset like a Rolex watch, you send it to us, we authenticate it, insure it, and store in our vaults, and then issue you that NFT. With that NFT, you can do whatever you want with it. You can sell it on OpenSea, you can collateralize, get a loan against it from something like Arcade. You can, fractionalize it. You can probably bring it into gaming, into the metaverse, and do stuff in the future. And the last use case I think we're working on is using these NFTs as collateral for like MakerDAO CDPs, so essentially decentralized stablecoins, right? But that's the Web 2. The Web 3 version of 4K is it's a decentralized permissionless protocol of what we call kind of like physical storage, physical validators, and physical oracles. Kind of like in crypto terms, it'd be like an IRL layer one, or in real life IPFS. And so you have physical storage nodes distributed across the world. It's not owned by a centralized entity, and you can store certain assets. So you can be like, I store Lambos at my house, and you can do so. And so 4K is just really just the first storage node on the network. We're just the first one, kind of proof of concept. We want others to join. We want brands to join. We want marketplaces to join. We want other storage services to join. And so I think the reason why the system is so critical and design something like this is in order to transact or trade or collateralize these assets, it has to be like trustless. You can't trust. A lot of people say like, why can't I have the physical and an NFT? But then we can't trust the individual. Like, what if you break it? What if you sell it, steal it, or damage it, or it's fake, or whatnot, right? You can't trust the individual. So there has to be some form of trust. It's got to be trustless. So if you want to do integration with any DeFi protocols to be trustless. Two, I'm very bullish on the DeFi because it's simple, it's easy. Like we did a loan recently with Arcade. You go on there, you request a loan, it gets filled in 2 seconds. I don't need to do paperwork. I don't need to do any of this stuff. I don't have to adhere to these conditions. I don't have to read these massive amount of terms. It's simple, simplistic, straightforward, instant. And I can pay it back a minute later, or the end of the loan is 90 days later. And so I love the simplicity. I love the cross border. So the other thing we run into is, somebody came to me recently, and institutions, and they were like, why do people outside the United States speculate on either crypto or collectibles? And I think it's perspective. It's that came to realization that if you're in another country in the world, investing in crypto or speculating on crypto and speculating on collectibles, if possible, is probably the best investment opportunity that you have access to in your local market. Mm-hmm. Like people don't realize that. Like we're lucky in the US where we have these opportunities, but they don't have access to New York Stock Exchange, for example, in many countries, most countries around the world. And so it's like for them to be able to speculate for fun if they choose to on a pair of Yeezys, like that is probably one of the best opportunities that they might have, and they can't really do that today. And so it's kind of like what this does is it enables borderless collectors, like collectors that can actually be anywhere around the world, anything, and eventually you could be a full-time 9DCC shirt trader. You could be a full-time Rolex trader. You can do all of these things, and the point of that is, to me, it's like it's a form of freedom. Like kind of want to do what I want. Like we give you the NFT, you do whatever you want. We don't have generally very limited any restrictions. Like we obviously don't take drugs or guns or anything like that. Somebody said the other day is like, can you guys NFT guns and bring them into video games? And I was like, probably not. We're not gonna NFT a Glock and bring it into CS:GO. I was like, it's kind of interesting use case, but I think it enables all these new things. I think it enables a much freer society, in my opinion, and also just gives people the power. Like one of the key issues I have is that the middlemen. And so the one thing, for example, that annoys me is that payment processing. It's 2.9%, 2.7%, and to me, if people didn't know this, it's kind of like a giant I don't know. I say scam to a certain extent, because the real rate at which credit card companies charge payment processors is something called the Chase interchange rate. You can actually sign up for this as an e-merchant. So you go to Chase Merchant Services. They try to sell you on Chase Merchant Services, but you tell me, we want interchange. So the interchange rate, the credit cards, Chase will charge you 0.3 to 0.8% for any transactions. So if you think of PayPal, you think of Stripe, you think of all these big companies, they make, PayPal is $15 billion in profit or something like that. They essentially make that money almost on the spread between the two, between the Chase interchange rate and 2.9%. It's 2022. Why are we paying 2.9% for transaction fees or 2.7% for transaction fees? And so what is powerful about crypto and using crypto and to speculate, to buy, to consume, to whatever with these assets is that that fee reduction is magnitude lower, and that's what's needed. Like I think trying to work with the existing system of this high fees is just really challenging. There's so many roadblocks. But with crypto, it was kind of hey, you got the existing system, we have this system on the side, and we can have new rules, and we can have new things. And one of those is which I love, is instant settlements and low fees. That's incredible, and I think that's really powerful for people. And if you are familiar with the existing kind of Web2 platforms for these assets, the fees are astronomically high. I mean, I don't want to name, but some of them are 9% for seller, 3% withdrawal fees plus sales tax. Those are massive fees. If you're trying to trade plus shipping, handling, if you're trying to trade these assets, you got to make 30, 40% margin just to break even. And so it doesn't make any sense. And to me, that fee, the credit card fee and these fee of middlemen platforms, is kind of like a tax, a global tax on the working class. That's what it is to me. It's a huge middleman fee. And they don't actually decrease these fees. These fees are actually continuously increasing, which is kind of, to me, the sad part. And to me, it's the global tax. And so I think when moving this into crypto and using NFTs and crypto, I think it's just it's a great democratization of arguably peer-to-peer markets to a certain extent.
Right. I totally agree with that. Right. I think that to me is one of the most interesting parts of it, is that forgetting just about the credit card processes was also like, what happens when you're trading stuff on these authenticator apps, right? Where, they're on top of the credit card processing fees, the fees you have to pay in order to make sure something's authentic, and like the wait time and like, get the payout wait and all these things, right? So I totally agree with you. I think to me, that's what makes this tech super, super extraordinary, and why I think the real world use cases with assets like this makes so much sense. I want to back up for a second to something you said a little bit earlier, just now. Is okay, you're building it, 4K is building out, it's one node on the protocol, right? And so, like, explain to me, like, what if if GMoney wanted to build his own node on the protocol? What does that look like?
Right. So there are a few different parties. So there's a few different things you can do. You can be a physical oracle. So the two oracles we have are what we call physical asset pricing oracles, and we have audit oracles. Audit oracles audit physical storage providers. The second type is physical validators. You can be an authenticator or an appraiser. And the third type, the core part, is you be a physical storage. So if you wanted to join the network, you're like, hey, I want to be like a storage provider and I want to store Lambos at my house, then you can propose that to the network and actually kind of start doing that. So we'll have more information on exactly the requirements, but for example, you're going to have our token, because what that does is acts as a kind of a bond against any type of bad behavior. So you get slashed. So for example, if you store a Lambo, let's say you stake $1 million worth of assets of tokens, and you damage a Lambo and it's like $50,000 repair bill, you get slashed for that. And so it acts as like the way I look at designing crypto systems is that there has to be monetary damages, monetary risk. I think without monetary risk, it really encourages bad behavior. So with crypto, what I love about it, it's like it's nice, it's pure. So there has to be significant monetary risk for bad behavior. And so all of these people, either you be an authenticator, an appraiser, you're an oracle, whatever, you have to stake a ton of tokens in order, and so you risk getting slashed if you kind of misbehave or do something bad. And
So,
so
like, I guess along those lines, right? And let's go back to the Lambo example, right? So let's say I store 5 Lambos at my house, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like take one out every day of the week, right? It's like I take one out on Monday, I don't crash it, whatever, but the odometer goes up, right? I put more mileage, more wear and tear on it. How? I mean, and I understand that maybe you haven't thought about it yet because nobody's storing Lambos on chain just yet. But like, how would the slashing work in that, right? Because it's like technically there is no damage, but obviously the value's gone down if somebody stored it with me when it had like 100 miles and now it has 1,000 miles.
right. So the way we look at that is, one, it gets verified by the audit oracles. So the audit oracles will actually audit. So we're going to be launching examples of this. For example, users will be able to request audits. So you can be like, I request an audit of this Lambo. Even though if you don't own it, you can just pay a small fee and request an audit of it. Two, there will be distinct slashing of kind of conditions where there'd be different tiers. There'd be like, one's like you totaled the Lambo. B would be like, hey, you damaged it. C is like you misbehaved. But thing is that if you decide to do that, you lose a lot of trust and people wouldn't send you assets. They're like, well, why would I send a Lambo to him? And it's based on reputation, right? So you might be at like a large brand, let's say like Yeezys or Nike joins. And so there's a lot of reputational risk on that part too. And as a source provider, you will be compensated fairly well. So I think, the reputational risk is high. At the same time, a lot of the high quality storage providers will provide, real world insurance. So for example, for our facility, it's fully insured under Lloyd's. And so to go through all of these hoops, to do all of these things, and if you actually get it on board, I think there's just significant financial risk for you and reputational risk.
So do you think that your initial, like, let's say the next nodes, and I assume you've been having conversations with people that are companies that are interested in creating nodes? Like,
Yes.
would you say that the next ones are probably brands or people that we would know from like the legacy world? That's like, oh, okay, like I trust this company that,
Correct.
they will, like, it's not like, John Doe just being like, yeah, let me just park these Lambos in my car, in my
Yeah.
garage, right?
Right. So we have some big ones coming out. I'd say, I don't know what, we haven't disclosed this publicly, but I'd say the largest physical asset storage provider in the world, $250 billion of physical assets, owns a bunch of free ports, if people know what that is. And they have one of the largest insurance policies in the world for transporting physical assets. And so some people like this, the $250 billion of client assets are restored with these people. And so they can simply just move it into a new stall and that get turned into an NFT. So this is like
Right.
so we're gonna have that coming on. We're gonna have brands coming on. So we're gonna be piloting with a few brands to kind of launch this with. I think it's be really interesting there as well, because think of it this way, right? So I'm gonna give an example of why a brand might use something like 4K. So I use an example like Nike. Nike, when they sell a sneaker, they make $100. That's their kind of maximum revenue per sneaker from per user per person. So with 4K, let's say they become a guardian and they join, they can store assets. Now they can see like, hey, when you check out and you try and buy that sneaker, you can click a little checkbox that says like convert to NFT, kind of cool, kind of easy. And so when you do that, Nike can charge you like an annual fee for storage, maybe $5, $10, whatever they want to charge you for that storage fee for that sneakers. They're already storing it in their warehouse. And then, so that's the second revenue stream for Nike. Third revenue stream is that the user does not pay for the storage fees, like kind of like a public storage unit. It goes off to auction, and Nike will actually, with the storage provider, will earn a majority of those proceeds. So that's like two new revenue drivers. And the third one would be if Nike or a brand or any brand decide to offer some form of financial services, integration with DeFi on the back end there as well as fourth. So what you're doing is you see an expansion of revenue channels for these brands. And also, I think the last part is integrating in with like interesting crypto tools. So for example, using like AMMs or upcoming bonding curves. And I think that offers maximum price discovery.
Right. And so you're basically telling me that 10 years from now, we're going to be watching a virtual version of Storage Wars in the metaverse where people are bidding on 4K lockers.
I think no, 100%, not even 10 years. I think the ones that will be really fun will be, complete new versions of like unboxing, kind of like unboxing videos or like speculation. Like if you buy like, let's say there's a safety deposit box sort of assets, you get the NFT and it's like a secret NFT using $0 proofs. And like you can all them, but yes, there'll be many fun. Use cases, right?
You're giving me some ideas now, right? But yeah, I wanna YVR from the Emit One community. We asked Emit One to kind of submit some questions before the podcast, and they brought up a pretty solid question. I think it makes sense to ask here. Is there a backup plan in case of insolvency in terms of 4K?
Right. So good question. So how we have structured this legally and how we structured this is that the user ultimately owns the what we call the warehousing receipt for that item. So think of a warehousing receipt as like, so when you transport high value assets, they actually, a lot of times they don't transport the actual like asset. Like we're not transporting a Basquiat. They don't say that. We're transporting this warehousing receipt that's insured for $100 million, and that's how they actually do the insurance policies in real life, and it's unsealable or breakable, et cetera, et cetera. It's a similar thing. So in terms of insolvency, the user ultimately still owns the actual asset. So let's say 4K goes insolvent and the user needs to get all their assets back. We'll probably have like a 1, maybe if not like a 2-year redemption period. And after that, we'll probably just like, we'll let everyone know you have 2 years to redeem your assets. If you don't, then we'll find something to do, whether go on a case-by-case basis or otherwise just, auction them off or, lotto them off to the community, one or the other. So that's how I look at it. Ultimately, like, we don't actually own the actual assets. It's the user that does.
Right. And then I guess
ownership.
And then I guess as the network builds out, right, then I assume like if one node becomes insolvent, then I guess assets could technically just be transferred to another node where they're held until then, right? This is an issue if it's a one node problem right now.
Correct. Right. Correct. So that's exactly it. That's actually on our roadmap, is offering the ability for people to transfer assets between nodes. It's actually quite hard to build, but that's exactly it. So you want to be like, hey, my assets are stored in the 4K facility in Delaware, United States, but we want to move it to Singapore, Freeport. Like, you just log in and click a few buttons and it'll be done.
Right. No, I think that's really cool. With that, I wanna transition over a little bit to some stuff. What we're doing with 90cc and 4K. I want to start with, because this was a question that I had initially, very early on when we initially started our talks, because I didn't know this, so I'm sure a lot of people don't know this, was the decision to use ERC 1155s instead of 721s. And I know we went back and forth on this a lot in our initial conversations, because I was like, no, like, you can't make 1155s. They have to be 721. So can you go over that decision, explain, I guess, to the users, why you chose 1155s, as well as, the fact that you can have unique assets as 1155s?
Right. So the difference really is kind of think of it as, draw a parallel would be like Bitcoin is like 721 and 1155 is more like a version of Ethereum. It just offers you a little more flexibility. It offers you a little more feature sets. For example, 1155 supports both the non-fungible tokens, also semi-fungible. So if you're dropping, semi-fungibles, kind of like, a medium t-shirt, you're going to need semi-fungibles. I think it makes sense. They kind of stack together. Second point is we've built is collections. And so imagine if you kind of just launch, every single time you want to launch a product, you have to launch a new collection. And so that makes it difficult to get approved on OpenSea or whatever. Now you have one collection, like GMoney's collection, and you can have token ID 1 would be like your first one. Token ID 2 would be your next one. Token ID 3 would be the next one. And because of the semi-fungible nature of this, you can use, DeFi tooling. So whether it be AMMs and et cetera. So think of it as like just a little more advanced version of a 721. It offers virtually everything a 721 has. It just offers more feature sets.
And it's more gas efficient.
Yes, it's significantly more gas efficient.
Right. Yeah, no, and thank you for clarifying that, because I remember in our first, I think 2 conversations, I think we were going back and forth where I was like, no, what are you talking about? Everything I knew about 1155s is that it's just for additions. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think that will also answer a bunch of questions for people where being like, oh, wait, I got an 1155. This isn't a unique asset, right? And so I think that that's super important, right? I guess also, talk a little bit about, the initial partnership between 90cc and 4K, kind of how, because I see this also as a test case for, how other brands will be able to work with 4K. And so just explain to those, the users at home that might not know exactly how this is working.
Got it. So what 90cc has done is they sent us all the items, and then we vaulted them, and we actually issued the NFTs. So the key to here, the thing is essentially you have a third party auditor auditing or verifying that these assets actually exist, and then they can state at which they exist in, right? So they kind of be as trustless. And to me, this is kind of like the canary in the coal mine. I'm not sure better metaphor for that, maybe the first indication, kind of like CryptoKitties before NFTs launched. And I'm so bullish on tokenized merch. I think tokenized merch is going to become the new way merchandising is done globally. I think all major brands are going to launch physically backed NFTs in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner. And once the tooling gets better, what we're really lacking, and something I want to point out is a lot of people talk about NFTs, a lot of people talk about this type of stuff, but hardly many people talk about the actual core technology required to make this happen. So I'll see a lot of sell side firms. I see a lot of people saying oh, NFTs can do X, Y, Z, but very few people actually work on the NFT tech, and that's what we're really focused on. But what this NFT tech does is it's going to enable tokenized merch, and I think this is going to be huge. I think in the next 3 years, last time I said it was shorter, but I'd say 3 years, there might be full-time VCs that invest in merchandise. There'll be funds that they'll be I bought a Solana hoodie, half a Solana hoodie, I collateralized that, and bought a Near Protocol hat, collateralized that, and bought some
90cc drip,
right.
Some 90cc drip. No, I agree with you. I think we're probably going to see the rise of, especially I think as fashion and let's say sneakerheads, because I think sneakers are to me, sneakers, watches. Well, I mean, watches that people will wear a lot, but sneakers are one of those things that there are a significant number of people that buy them and never wear them, right? So it's for me, it's well, if you're gonna buy it and you're gonna never wear it, why even hold it in your closet? Why not just send it somewhere, store it, and now you have all these tools available to it, right? And so it's to me, it's that starts to make sense, and then you can all of a sudden start giving that 15, 16-year-old kid or young kid in his 20s that understands sneaker and streetwear culture really, really well, now can be okay, I'm going to raise a $5 million fund, and I'm going to invest in sneakers, and I'm going to invest in streetwear, and all of a sudden I can take my expertise in culture and in streetwear and monetize it with scale, right? Because right now the problem that I think a lot of people run into is the scale, the issue of one, not having the capital, but then two, if I'm storing stuff, I'm if I went up to you, I'm hey, Richard, give me $100,000. I'm going to buy a bunch of sneakers and I'm going to just store them in my closet. And I promise you, I'm not going to wear them. Right. You're going to be yeah, well, best of luck. Let me know how that turns out for you. Right. But if all of a sudden it's yeah, it's going to be custodied in a 4K vault and, I won't be able to take things out unless, there's 3 or 4 signatures on the multi-sig or whatever. Right. And all these tools that start getting built around it, you start having this massive unlock. And that to me is what is the most exciting.
Correct. So exactly on your point, it's like, if you look on the forums of sneaker people, like some people sneak, like, they sleep with a gun under the pillow and their living room stacked floor, ceiling, and sneakers. I see this all the pictures all the time. But what has really, really been stifling for them is the fee structures. I was on the forums doing my research, and it was like, hey, the cost to turn a profit is just too much. The time is too long, right? It takes 20 to 30 business days, which is kind of backwards if you think about it. And the simply the cost. And so this enables all of that. I think the second thing that really enables is, you're right, it offers like some form of decentralized ownership. So for example, if you're a DAO, you come in here and you buy, an art piece and it gets stored, right? So somebody can rug that. One of the DAO members without 4K would consider, just has to hold the physical or access to the physical of some sort, can rug it or run away. But now imagine you store with 4K, you put the NFT in a multi-sig for all of the DAO members, and therefore you can start, as DAO, you start purchasing physical assets. We've had a lot of requests come through for this as well. And so this just enables a whole new primitives. But particularly, I'm super excited for, I think, for the traditional world kind of collectibles or use cases there, but I'm also for Web3 native one, which I think is what 9DCC is doing, is kind of like the tokenized merch. I honestly think I'm super excited for that. I think it's going to be a wild ride for the next few years.
Right. Yeah, no. And, to build on that point on DAOs, I'm a member of multiple DAOs, right? And like literally more and more people are linking some sort of physical to digital, and people are like, oh, well, how do we store it? And I'm like, yeah, like, 4K, like this, we literally send it to them. And I did this, and even before, we made this announcement, right? I did this as like a proof of concept, where I reached out to you and I told you I'm bidding on these Louis Vuitton Air Force Ones at Sotheby's. I don't even want them coming to my home, right? Because like, I'm just going to send them directly from Sotheby's directly to 4K, so that, if and when that origin, gets questioned, it's like, no, like 4K can verify that like this was received from Sotheby's. Here's the bill of lading or the shipment or whatever. And all of a sudden that's like, that begins to act as your authenticity. And now I have these assets on chain that I can insert, like, I've had people, that have found out that I have this on chain that are like, been like, oh, I'll give you a loan against it. And I'm like, cool. Like, I don't need the money. So like the terms better be great. Right. So it's like, but it's those things that like now this value unlock starts to happen. Cause like, I'm never going to wear those sneakers. Maybe one day, but like, like those sneakers are pieces of art. Like they're not going to be worn. And so, it's like, why would I, outside of maybe me holding them in a case or something so I can look at them physically, if they're an investment vehicle for me or a store of value, then, I might as well put them in a free port, right? In a vault where I don't have to worry about, is it going to get stolen in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping, right? To me, like, this is really what, like, really, like, when I think about this and like the opportunities that are made available to people that otherwise didn't have that, like, it is like such a no-brainer, right? And it's like I feel like people haven't caught on to it because they don't know that it exists yet. Even now within crypto, when I talk to people, like, they're like, whoa, like that's crazy. I didn't even think about that, right? So it's like, that's how early we are, especially into this digital, the tokenization of physical assets.
Right. And I think it just unlocks so much value for society and for people across the globe, right? We're just talking not in the United States, we're talking abroad as well. You can have storage facilities in South America and Africa and the Middle East and whatnot. They could do trading those assets or, storing those assets over there as well. And I think the key thing too is like, once you turn these assets into like a digital form, it just unlocks so many options. Like I was joking, like you can, have like virtual reality Tinder, and then you can walk around in your avatar and you have like a Rolex watch. You got to have the NFT for, or a pair of sneakers. You got to have the NFT for. It just unlocks like really interesting use cases. And one that we brought up too was like, well, technically, you could join the 4K network as like a horse stable owner. You could store horses, and you can actually like NFT horses and then bring into something like Zed Run and start racing them and breeding them and doing things with them, and causes economic collapse based upon what happens to the horse in life. But right. The one thing that I just want to please note that how we're making this work is actually the core tech. So one of the tech that we're working on, and we're actually just launching on testnet very shortly, is what we call on-chain storage and insurance fees. And so before 4K, there was really like, let's say you buy, you have the sneakers, you send them 4K, we issue you the NFT, you sell the NFTs to somebody that holds in a pseudo-anonymous wallet, and he doesn't, we can't reach them, no email, no phone number, no way to reach them, and they hold it for 5 years. Who's paying for storage insurance, right, in the facility. And so that was the one core problem. Someone has to do that. And we also had to build a way to prevent locking mechanisms and wrapping mechanisms. So what we've done is we actually built the fee onto the NFT itself. So you got to kind of top off the NFT for like your, let's say $100 a year. You have to top off the NFT. If you don't pay for your storage insurance fees, it gets kind of like locked down for 90 days, kind of like it's exactly like a MakerDAO CDP, and then it goes off to auction basis. But with this mechanism now, that it just enables all physical types of physical assets to come on chain, because ultimately somebody has to pay for it. Like if you NFT a horse, you're gonna have to pay for the horses. Like for example, its upkeep. Somebody came to us, and I know I'm joking about this. They want to NFT like a bunch of animals that they saved. It was like actual gorillas, and I was like little apes, and I was like, and they said like, yeah, we couldn't figure out a way how to have them pay for the maintenance, like the feeding and the taking care of the actual apes. And I was like, well, with this fee structure, you could do that. And so this is one of the core tech that enables this entire physical assets on chain to work, is this fee structuring. Without before this, it couldn't work.
Are you guys going to do that, or is that just like because that's pretty crazy?
We're on testnet already.
That's pretty incredible, right? Because when you sit there and it's like that, I mean, that's like animal rescue, right? Or you remember like those things? It's like feed a child a day for like $1 or something. It's like it's kind of like the same thing, right? Exactly. Where it's like you can sit there and you can actually see that impact of being like, all right, well, I know that the upkeep costs whatever. $100 a month in order to quote unquote save the rainforest or whatever it is. That's really cool. I didn't even think about that use case. That's really, really awesome.
Like a good one would be like this one. I jokingly call it like Meow DAO. So you go rescue like 100 cats. You build them like a cat paradise. You live stream it to Twitch, like a bunch of cameras, and then you NFT each cat, and you work out a deal with like a game. I don't know, CryptoKitties, Axie Infinity, whatever. You can bring those cats into the game. And I always tell people like it causes cascading economic effect. I was thinking like probably first like $1 million cat, if not $10 million cat. But like the point of this is like you need the oracles to verify. You need all these things in place. You need the on-chain fees structure, on-chain fees. You need all these components to make it work. We try to build the most simple protocol. We try to remove all the nice to haves and build the most basic protocol, and that's kind of what we're working on. Think of us as like the physical to digital operating system. Like once this is step one, once you figure out step one, everything can be built on top. So many new things can be built on top. We're receiving them on a daily basis of new things that can be built.
Wow, I mean that's my head's like exploding internally right now as I'm thinking about it. What is would you say that that's the craziest thing you've heard of somebody approach you with, or what would you say is one of the crazier things you've heard?
Oh, I mean, like a lot of
I love, like I always like I'll get on like brainstorming sessions with people on my team. I'm like, tell me what is the craziest shit that you think we could do? Because like that's where like you start pushing boundaries, right? Because it's like okay, that might not be doable, but wait, we can kind of back our way into that, right? So that's why I'm always super curious, is like the crazy stuff that probably people approach you with.
Yeah, I think the gun into video games was a thing. That was like kind of surprising. I mean, we get the requests for like,
but even
drugs.
But thinking about, let's say, the gun into the video game, right? I know a lot of times people do the guns for like groceries or guns for like something, right? It could be a way for like the government or whatever police force, whatever agency is like that they want to like get guns off the streets of being like, okay, we will take this physical gun and like retire it or whatever, and we'll give you like this asset in like your favorite video game or whatever. And like,
right, it might be a nonprofit org or something like that, right? I don't know. That one was
otherwise I know that that's like regulatory concerns and all that stuff, but like thinking about it, I'm like, wow, like people could be incentivized, right? Like everybody's has a different incentive mechanism, and that could work technically with the right partners.
Yeah. Right. We have those. We have like, I think the safety deposit boxes kind of like shielded physically and shielded on chain. I think secret NFTs combined with safety deposit boxes, I think unlocks the whole thing. We just can't, we're going to X-ray them. So no drugs and guns or weapons of sorts, but that could unlock, I think, a whole new form of unboxing YouTube videos for people. I think that'd be a whole new wild use case. I think the animal thing is hilarious. I think somebody's going to do it. One that we did request recently as well is like, technically you use the 4K protocol to bring real estate on chain. So what I mean by that is you could join the 4K protocol as like, let's say you're like a house that you want to rent out, and you issue 365 NFTs, and you can redeem them for a day or X amount of time, whatever you want, and you can pay fees. So technically it would actually work fairly well. So there's a lot of use cases we haven't really explored, but we're just starting with the most basic use cases, step one at a time, and then all these new ones are going to come on in the next few years.
Right. Okay, cool. And I didn't mean to really go off topic there, but I was just like, whoa! I'm like, this is really really fucking cool. Of things that like I wasn't thinking about. Let's talk about, I guess, the vouchers, right, and the redemption mechanism, right? So, we sold 90cc. It was the iteration one looks, right, where it was six shots shot by Justin Aversano. Each shot represented a different size. Now, on a certain date, we're going to take a snapshot. That date hasn't been determined yet, and part of the reason that we haven't been able to determine that date is because of the way the system works with 4K, in the sense that we can't take that snapshot and you can't even issue those NFTs until you actually receive the physical product, right? And, obviously there's delays with the supply chain and the real world happens, and that's really kind of the things that are getting in the way. But kind of, can you explain that process a little bit of like what that looks like and how it works from the 4K end?
Right. And that's, I think, what makes 4K powerful is that we're not going to be issuing tokens for stuff that the protocol has not received, right? We're not going to be offering futures. We're not going to be running in that. I think that's how you build that trust factor, right? So we know, like, we physically count like 100 t-shirts in here, and we have video proof. We actually use security labels on them. So in tamper proof security labels, categorize them. And then we're also going to, all this data will be on chain as well. So we provide proof. And we're actually going to do something cool. There's going to be live streaming assets. And so it's a really cool asset I'll talk about later, maybe at the end, an asset they're adding. That's going to be really cool. But so it's really easy.
Well, we're getting close to the end, so just talk about it
okay.
now.
So what we're doing on November 3rd, so we have a Cassatius coin that is a physical Bitcoin. So they're from 2013, like a physical Cassatius coin. We're actually sending it off on a Falcon 9 rocket into space, and it's going to come back to Earth. So technically, it'll be the first Bitcoin in space, and we're gonna NFT that, and then it's gonna like kind of spin. We're gonna just live stream it onto Twitch. And so how it works is really easy. Think of it as for 9DCC. It's like you kind of go through your typical shopping cart experience. So you kind of go through checkout system, and you just type in your address. You send the NFT to the address, redemption address, and then that's it. And I think that's the version 1. The future version that we've already scoped out technically is more complicated, but we call it like a Web3 like shipping and redemption. So you have to just verify your address by signing a message, for example, that's tied to your wallet, because people can do this unscrupulously right now. So somewhat unscrupulously, but like it's still hard. But now we're building this new checkout system. So the point is, like, all these things are really necessary or really nice to have, and there's like hardly anyone out there working on this tech. And I feel like we're like kind of the only ones kind of like thinking about it and working on it. And we just need more resources. Like that's wish all these things existed. They should exist today. I'm super excited for AMM integrations. I'm super excited for bonding curve. Bonding curve merchandise is going to be wild, I think, in the future.
Go over that. Kate, go over that for a second for those that don't know. I know we've talked about it, but yeah, cool. I mean, I guess the simplest idea is Uniswap, right? Unisocks, right?
Yeah, so people who don't know, there was a pair of socks that was dropped by Uniswap. They dropped 500 pairs of socks, I believe, at $12 a piece, and 199 of the 500 have been redeemed, so 301 left. I think right now it's trading at $20-some thousand a pair of socks. I think it peaked at $160,000 for a pair of socks. I think Fred Ersham wear them when he rung the bell for a Coinbase IPO. As a kind of the homage to like the future of like exchanges, or you just love them, one or the other. But I think,
or just a subtle flex on national television.
Yeah, subtle flex. And so that's the point. It's like the Unisocks to me is kind of like almost like CryptoKitties. And same in 9DC, it's kind of like CryptoKitties, like the canary in the coal mine. It's the first indication. Like tokenized merch in general, like this indication is going to be huge in the future. I can't, there's so much more demand for certain products like collectibles that just can't satisfy. They just keep it exclusivity. So I think we think of it this way. The internet was the great democratization access to information. You could be in Kansas and you can access to the latest like Chanel runway items. You didn't have to live on Madison Ave in New York anymore to do so. But what came with that was that now it's all about, if you notice, it's about exclusivity. It's about what's cool, what's about like founders edition, access, early access. And so this is just going to manifest more so into the future because it's easy to get access to things on the internet. And so it's going to be, I think, AMMs and bonding curves. So, for example, you might drop a pair, like a T-shirt. A brand might drop a T-shirt. Say the first one is $10 and the last one is $1,000, and it's kind of on a bonding curve. And so you can kind of like guess where it goes. And also for the brand, it actually maximizes revenue. So let's say like you're selling 100 t-shirts for $100. That's all the money that your maximum revenue is that. But if you have it on a bonding curve, you can technically, it's like a Dutch auction to a certain extent. So you can kind of have like much better revenue and much better demand. And people can actually like, trade them, get a synthetic, borrow, collateralize against them. The point of this is like the DeFi integration, think of it as kind of like the financialization of the entire collectibles industry. You're bringing leverage into a system that has zero leverage. You think about $400 billion a year industry in the world, like it doesn't have any leverage. It's kind of mind boggling to you. And so
Right.
all of these tools, all these financial tools unlocks all of this value that's there. It's kind of like
Right.
what DeFi kind of did to crypto.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's really, I'm sitting here thinking, I always think about like, what are cool and interesting drop mechanics. And I know we've had that conversation on a bonding curve. At least initially, I didn't want to do it, but I for sure want to do at least one drop within the next 12 months that will have some sort of a bonding curve. Because I just think it's very interesting and fun because you kind of can theorize on the game theory behind it as much as you want. But until it's actually out in the wild, you don't know how it's going to do, right? And you don't know what it's going to be like. We're coming up on time. I want to, before I let you go, I want to ask you two questions. One is, what is actually in the vault? Like if you had to guess GMV of what you're holding about the value, and what is your favorite piece in the vault that you think that's currently in there?
Oh, good question. I think right now we're probably pushing like 10 million, well over $10
Okay.
million in there. I think that my favorite one is good question. I think it's going to be the Cassatius coin that comes back from space. I think like
Oh,
that is, I think that's kind of cool. It's kind of unique. We have, for example, we had a request a few months ago. I kid you not. They wanted to send a T-Rex. There's only 3 full-size T-Rexes in the world.
uh-huh.
They want, it's $36 million T-Rex, and they want to ship it to us from the Natural History Museum in New York City. And we were like, we can't. I have no idea how to store and handle like an actual T-Rex, one of 3
Right.
in existence, right? So we get requests for these interesting assets, but I think that's the one we currently have. I think that I'm particularly excited for. I'm a space nerd, so I kind of, it's
Uh-huh.
kind of interesting. Big crypto and space nerd kind of combined one. It's like a no-brainer. And I think other things would be I like that we just had the Boring Company flamethrower on there. We had
Right.
some problems
Yeah, I
shipping it
saw.
because
Yeah.
you can't ship it with the actual container. So we're like, well, kind of sucks. You can't ship it with the actual propane tank to
Right.
make it
Right.
work. But like we have that. We have a lot of seems like high demand for watches. We have some Beeples on there. We have some Damien Hirst. We have I put my original signed Blau and like physical album that came with the NFT on there recently. Just got that probably like maybe a month ago. And so we have some other really interesting things coming on. But what we really want to focus on is having people to send things to us. So not as an individual that like wants to sell a watch, that's cool, but like we want people to start launching their own collections. We want people to launch their own brands. Let's say like you own a comic book store, you can launch your own collection. You're a comic book guy, you can launch your own collection. You're a trading card guy, and you can be under you, and you can be the authenticator for all of them, for them as well.
Right.
So we want people to start, instead of us going out there and chasing and adding assets, we're actually focused on becoming like, I think of it more B2B. So we want brands, we want people to launch collections, we want marketplaces to build on top. So that's kind of
Right.
how we think about it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that speaks very much to like the partnership that we started, right? In the sense that it's like, yeah, I need a place to put this, right? And what better way than to have, instead of having a third party fulfillment that will then send it to you, send it directly to you from the factory, right? Because that's the authentication that you need. Um,
Right.
yeah.
And I guess on that point too is like it removes so much headache. So like if you use like a factory, a lot of them can't ship across the world, right? They can't. They'll ship to the United States, but they won't be like, hey, how do you ship it to Japan? B, if you use a 3PL service, they're usually dealing with like low value goods or standard consumption at goods. And so if you have high value assets or assets beyond, $2, 3, 4, $500, they get lost a lot of times in 3PL services. And 3PL services are generally not like white glove services. They just like bulk ship things. And with us, think of us as like a fancy 3PL service. So we can offer you, low end shipping, so just standard shipping. We can offer most of our items are fully insured, so we use overnight FedEx, UPS overnight, and it's insured up to 150,000 domestic US, and that can actually, depending on what country you send to, Go from $5,000 to $100,000, and then anything beyond 150,000, we work with Mulca Meet, the largest. They'll send an armored car. They pick it up with an armored personnel, put it in the car, and drive it to you personally, or fly it to you personally. And so it offers you a wide variety of options. It's a white glove service. So I was personally looking for an option like this beforehand, and I was finding all these 3PLs, but they're not really adequate for this. They're not designed for this.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on, Richard. I know I have to bounce. I have to go host a Twitter space right now, but thank you for coming on. I'm super excited about this. I feel like we might have gotten a little more in the weeds than maybe people would have thought, but like, I think it's because I find it so intriguing, right? Because it's like, it's one thing is just be like, okay, here's like a centralized custodian for what we're doing, but it's really like what you're building is like the first test case for this massive protocol where more and more people will then be empowered to bring their assets on chain and ultimately empower more people. So thank you for everything. For people that want to follow up with everything that 4K is doing, what's the best place for them to follow up?
Yeah, check out our Twitter. It's just 4K Protocol. The URL of the website is 4K.com, the number 4, the letter K.com. And my personal Twitter is Megatron, just like the Transformer.
All right, cool. And I highly thanks for coming on. And I highly recommend people go check out the Vault on 4K, or you can even check it out on OpenSea. I always like peruse there every once in a while to be like, oh man, is there maybe a watch that I want to get or something? But for the most part, people aren't selling any of their stuff yet. So so keep an eye on it though, but I'm sure you can find something. But thank you for coming on, and everybody, thanks for tuning in.